So I'm here to announce the final panel of the day, Delivering Digital Transformation Across the UK. The panel will discuss how many businesses have been found to not be equipped with the correct tools, skills and digital infrastructure to take advantage of the digital opportunity on offer. This panel is an opportunity to discuss why this may be, including looking at the digital divide across different age groups and socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as how leaders can ensure that we are able to make the most of technology and that everyone has the right skills to do so. We need to keep in mind, though, that the 9th Sustainable Development Goal set by the UN is investing in ICT access and quality education. I'd like you to please give a warm welcome to Harriet Parks, Learning and Development Lead at A&D Digital, Jacob Ferrugia, Programme Manager for the Digital Skills Council, and Holly Whittles, National Policy Skills Champion and the Federation of Small Businesses. Thank you.
Is that on? Yes. Hello, everyone. So it's great to be here talking about digital skills and digital skills divide. It's obviously a persistent issue that's been affecting the country for a long time, possibly even more persistent than inflation, and this really affects the progress that the country is making towards being a digital nation. So just following on from the last panel, AI has really been the topic in focus of late, and it presents a lot of interesting opportunities, but also a lot of interesting challenges, and it really highlights the needs for digital skills. So I think when we think about these things, we often think about advanced digital skills, so the people that are going to build the AI systems, but like the last panel we're touching on, there are a lot of roles in sort of associated with it, so policy, governance, ethics that all need skills around digital to be able to interact with AI. But then more fundamentally even is essential digital skills, so people having the fundamental skills to be able to engage in digital society and a digital economy. So it makes this I think quite an important topic for us to be talking about. So the point of this panel is to discuss why and the causes of us having a skills divide, and looking at what leaders can do to ensure that we are addressing it and making the most of technology to address the skills gap. So on that, I would like to introduce the panel. We have Harriet Perks from And Digital and Holly Whittle from the Federation of Small Business. I'll hand over to Holly to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name's Holly Whittles. I'm here representing the Federation of Small Businesses as their National Policy Skills Champion. I'm also a business owner. I own a data analytics consultancy, so everything I do is about digital skills.
And Harriet?
Fantastic. Hi everybody. I'm going to turn my microphone on. I'm London Learning and Development Lead for And Digital, which is a digital services company that's focused on partnering with organisations across sectors and industries from BA, Diageo, Whitbread, the Telegraph Group, the Department for Education, and we power the development of digital products, but also we focus on closing the digital skills gap and empowering companies with the right capabilities to really own and sustain these long-term in-house. And we've got a very modest mission to close the world's digital skills gap, starting with the UK. And to give you a bit of an insight into my background, so I actually sort of started off an interest in this area at university and widening participation. I then actually moved into teaching. So I was there for a while, sort of working with mentoring, closing the sort of general literacy skills gap in the state sector in secondary education, and then moved into And Digital kind of towards the end of the pandemic, post some fun teaching Macbeth on Microsoft Teams. And then sort of have been with And Digital for the last 2 years and have been recently selected as one of the 30 under 30 learning technologies members. So I'm really looking at kind of promoting collaboration, breaking down silos, sharing and learning from best practice nationally. And it's a real privilege to be part of that network and also to help further Anne's learning ecosystems as well as we progress.
Cool, thanks. So, Holly, would you like to get us started?
Okay. So in terms of research that the Federation of Small Businesses have been doing, 78% of small businesses across England are still struggling to recruit. And we have problems like ageing population, lack of digital skills and rural infrastructure. We're also looking at things like greater agency fees to recruit, salary expectations, and of course people wanting to work from home. And 17% of those businesses are engaging with schools and education, whereas the rest of it are just expecting it all to be done for them. So we need to do something about encouraging businesses to interact with education, because if we don't communicate the digital skills that we need and help bring those skills to life, then we're not really enabling those pathways into future digital. And 48% of those business owners are saying that those technical skills, those digital skills, are actually vital to the future growth of their businesses. So things like digital marketing, that's now touching every single sector. So it doesn't matter whether you're a digital business or not, you're going to need people with those skills. What we're also finding is that students aren't life and work ready. They're not coming out with the entrepreneurial skills, the creative skills, and more importantly, the digital skills. And things like social media and the rise of smartphones has altered their perception of reality and how to engage in person, so they're becoming less productive in the workplace. So from my point of view, it's really vital that businesses work together with education to try and help this gap. And also we need to do better at the digital infrastructure. I've come from a rural county today. It's been really hard to travel down here, let alone trying actually to connect onto the internet. And when we talk about things like the digital divide, we often focus on the cities and improving 4G, 5G. There are still rural areas that are struggling with 3G. So I would encourage people to really work together to try and address this massive problem.
Thanks, Holly. So, Harriet?
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd like to open with a bit of a whirl through and Digital's latest research into the digital skills gap itself. And we know that this is threatening the UK economy, actually 63 billion per year, lost in potential GDP opportunities. And our research has been just published last year, and it's based off sort of surveying 5,000 knowledge workers, the hiring managers and senior decision makers in companies. And what we found is that the digital skills gap is actually a multiplicity of gaps. And the first one is a real lack of understanding of what digital skills actually are. And what I found quite interesting was, a while back I was sort of having a little Google, just to find out what sort of the common perception is, sort of Joe blogs on the internet, of what digital skills are. And they're popularly sort of objectified and seems outside the self. So they're defined as kind of hard technical skills or basic sort of skills to do with sort of coding and programming and so on. And actually what we find, and this is from UNESCO to sort of various job sites and so on as well, but we found with those we researched as well, what's interesting is that 35% of those we surveyed found that they thought digital skills were the ability to fix IT issues, and almost half saw it as the ability to code and program. So this is backed up with our own research as well. And what we find is that actually, outside of those seen as experts in these areas, digital skills the perception needs changing. And we would like to broaden the definition and challenge it slightly, and focus on the power of essential human skills needed to really leverage the power of digital transformation. So this will include, say, on a team's level, it would be things like making sure we have psychological safety, effective feedback loops, agile structures. On an organisational level, it would be things like sort of encouraging experimentation, making sure we have meaningful diversity. And it's not just at an individual level. We often individualise the upskilling in the UK, focus on, are you able to influence, communicate with empathy, have a continuous learning mentality. All of these power skills are important, but we need to look a little bit more broadly. And so I think we're really limited by the fact that a lot of these skills are defined as soft skills, and with that comes the perception that they lack value, that they're easy, that they're somehow innate. So you've got the myth of the natural born leader that comes with them. And so we'd like to sort of challenge this. I'll briefly whirl through a couple of other digital skills gaps that we found. One is actually in leaders' perceptions of which skills are even possessed in their organisation, and also which ones are important as well. So, for example, we found that about 56% of managing directors that we surveyed stated that psychological safety was important, compared to 69% of middle managers. So and that sort of misalignment on various different power skills is seen across organisations. We also know, obviously, of course, there's a lack of upskilling, and actually 58% of our respondents reported that they had never received digital upskilling at work. So, of course, there's a focus on all of this. The power skills are important, but again, we know there's a lot of conversation going on at the moment about the basic skills that we need as well. And I will never forget when I was teaching in the height of the pandemic, I received an email from one of my sixth formers. And the entire body of the email was in the subject line. I had to sort of scroll across to find out what they were saying. And that was just one example of how really, even at sort of top levels of school, there's my literature class, A-level, they still lack the fundamental digital literacy, the basic skills needed. And we do have a focus on this. Of course, the DFE now has the essential digital skills framework for life and work, but we're not seeing that translating into schools and actually tangibly being held accountable for this, making sure that we're changing the way that we're educating our students as a result. I'll just end this kind of opening remark with the fact that, with a reminder that we're stretching to careers that span longer than 5 decades, and so we need sort of generally, let alone kind of what's going on at a student level, to be able to upskill and reskill to make sure that we're able to really adapt and flex to the transformative shifts that are happening across the social political sphere. And so I'm really hoping that we can really, first of all, really understand what digital capabilities are needed, where the gaps actually are, and create the right environments and access to upskill and reskill appropriately.
Thanks, Harriet. So, really interestingly, I think you both highlighted fundamental gaps, both in the education system and in the workplace, that are resulting in people being sort of ill-equipped. So, if we could sort of take that and sort of talk about why we think that might exist, but coming at it from an angle of sort of the socio-economic and age factors of that sort of influence people being impacted by the digital divide. So. Would either of you like to?
Yeah, I'll kick off with that. I'm based in a rural county, and we're in Shropshire, and we're finding that we've got an ageing population because all of the young students are leaving. They want to go to university elsewhere. They want to have jobs elsewhere. And we've also got problems with digital infrastructure, so as I mentioned before, lack of 3G, broadband. So it's not an exciting place to be. So we are working really hard locally to make it attractive to study here and also stay here as well, because then those digital skills will come through into the workplace. But we're certainly finding it's really hard to recruit those students with those sort of smart digital skills. And it's helping to bring some of those subjects to life as well. So when they're learning maths, well, that's the gateway to learning coding, Python, then you can learn machine learning, then you can learn AI. So we're trying to very much work at a local level with education to bring these subjects to life. But we've very much got the ageing population working against us, and also that digital infrastructure.
That's really interesting. I think it's what I was thinking in that was it's ironic that digital opens up so many opportunities, sort of takes removes the boundaries of location, but still the location is a significant factor.
Especially with more people wanting to work from home as well.
Yeah.
We had someone that tried to work from home this morning, had to come into the office because they just couldn't get online. So we need to do better.
Yeah, I think there is this sort of idea that there are, we still do have digital, so there are digital hubs in the UK, sort of cities promote themselves as digital hubs when really, is that necessary, and can we just be a digital nation first and foremost?
Well, just to add to that, it's interesting to hear from Ofcom's one of the most recent reports that 80,000 homes and businesses don't have access to the decent broadband. It's like putting some stats behind it. It's just, and then thinking about the wider context of the number of people who are living in poverty at the moment in the UK. 22% of the population. That's what I was sort of reading recently, and obviously then. That has knock-on impact. So 1 million have then recently cut back on their broadband packages altogether. And we find that, of course, then this affects the access and the skill that people have in the digital sphere. And we know that there are efforts to challenge this and tackle this. The DFE provided millions of laptops during the pandemic, but actually what we then found was, well, if people don't have the basic broadband to be able to actually use them, or if they haven't got the IT departments in schools to be able to properly set students up on them, then we're really limited in this area. So that's one sort of consideration to bring in. And of course, thinking about, I was speaking to sort of various people in my company in preparation for this and getting different views. And one of them was sort of a product specialist was talking about how we need to think about the way that within companies we also design the technology that we're creating, putting out there. So we tend to find that when people are choosing things like, I don't know, user personas, they will focus on those who very much are a reflection of themselves still. So we'll have people who are kind of, I don't know, maybe sort of 20 to 40, Western, middle class, relatively, they have a certain level of education, and actually there isn't enough focus on things like dyslexia, colour blindness, a whole range of disabilities. And so when you think about kind of the digital divides in the UK and then kind of the root causes of them, we're not actually even making our technology accessible in the first place. And so no wonder that we find a lot of the statistics show that especially those with disabilities are really lacking the skills that they need to have the appropriate level of access. And I think one thing that really interests me, I think we need to focus a little bit on the age divide as well, so that we have a whole range of kind of myths, assumptions and stigmas that are also feeding into this. So we have this great perception that we have the digital native generation. And actually in our research, we found recently that it was 2/5 of 18 to 34-year-olds said they were embarrassed by their lack of digital skills, that they're younger than most employees, they feel like they should have a better understanding. And then when we get to the sort of other end of our mature workers, we had over a quarter of them wanting to improve their digital skills, but actually feeling daunted by the prospect, not comfortable with bringing it up with their employers. Again, so we're lacking sort of psychological safety within organisations to address this as well. This is not even coming on to sort of the power skills and the human skills that we need to leverage to really ensure digital transformation in companies. So thinking about how we problem solve, have empathy for the customer, fail fast, create structures for experimentation. There's more to say, but I don't want to keep going on this. But yes, really, really fascinating to start to bring other elements into this as well.
I just want to sort of just dig into that a little bit more around how much. Like we see there's issues in the education system, sort of not addressing it, but then also in the workforce, and where like you sort of see it being incumbent on more in one area than the other to start addressing this. So do we think this is a fundamental issue for education to really be addressing it from the minute people are sort of within education, or is it for is there a need for employers to be doing more about this as well?
I think it's both. I think education, it's not just about sticking a laptop in front of them that's been funded. They still need to understand core digital skills, like how to research something, like how do you teach that? We as a business, we would expect them to know how to search the internet, but I don't know whether that's actually being taught. That's a digital skill. The kind of language that we're using, Harriet already mentioned, how to write an email. There's a certain way that you do it, that sometimes some of the students, the language they're speaking doesn't even make sense to me because it's like very text-based instant language. So for me, it's about, we need to teach them those skills about how to utilise digital, but also as businesses we very much need to go in there and we need to talk to them and we need to tell them what it's like in the world that they're going to be coming into work into. And two things that I recommend is the Enterprise Advisor route, which is working with the Careers and Enterprise Company, and the other route that I promote very much is the STEM Ambassadors route. So that's going into schools, running STEM activities. So I think there's two different things there going on, but I think it's education and business.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. It's sort of mentioned that I'm working with the Digital Skills Council, and that it's very much the idea being to bring together education, industry, and government to address this, so that it is everyone's problem, and we'll have the most impact by working on this together.
Yeah, well, to add on to this, I thought it was quite interesting, sort of obviously working within the school, seeing the amount of curriculum time that's given to actually developing digital skills. And what you have, an hour, 45 minutes worth of computing time per week, that's not sufficient. And I was working in some schools that had Google Classroom set up and every student had their own device, but that was not the norm. But in those school settings, when computing is not regulated to sort of a room in a school that's separate from everything else that you can't often touch, and people have the ability to play with the devices, familiarise themselves with them and so on, you're much better able to develop the skills that you need. But of course we're needing to think more holistically on a national level about how we actually integrate abilities and options to develop the digital skills needed. And absolutely couldn't agree more on the drive to get representation from businesses. And I was speaking to another colleague recently who was at a careers fair in Barkingham and Dagenham, and it was at a school that has a lot of low-income families, a lot of preschool meal students, and they found that they were the only tech company there. They had the RAF, they had the Army, and others represented TfL, but not actually the representation that was needed to really showcase what's possible in a career, and the plurality of options available to you. It's not just about coding. Okay, you can go into the product space or the UX space. Just really kind of broadening people's horizons. So we absolutely need that support from industry, enterprise level, to get back into the education system too.
Yeah, and an example of that, where I was saying about businesses and education need to work together, we were on an advisory panel for a university that were developing a data science degree. And we were saying to be a really good data scientist, it's not just about the data science itself. You've got to have those business skills, because essentially you're going to be interviewing a business, you're going to be trying to get the requirements out of them to visualise the product properly. So the university took our feedback on board, and they actually added in an entrepreneurship module. So that was focusing on some of these basic skills that we're talking about, those employability skills, the entrepreneurship skills, the digital skills, as well as the data science degree. And we ran that last year, and we had amazing feedback from the students. So I'm like, why can't we do this with other courses, regardless of the sector, regardless of what they're learning? Why can't we teach those skills? Surely that's a quick win.
I was going to say that's actually a nice segue into the next question, which is sort of talking about industry and what leaders within industry can be doing. So we've touched on collaboration and STEM ambassadors, but specifically leaders within industry. What do you think that they can be doing to address the digital divide, particularly considering socioeconomic and age factors?
One thing we do in our business is we encourage continual professional development and learning. So we encourage them to do things like Microsoft examinations. But it's not just about tick box doing exams. It's also about doing digital skills through the apprenticeship route. So I put one of my staff through a digital marketing apprenticeship. So I think it's encouraging that evolving, you never stop learning, let's keep upskilling. And when we talk about things like apprenticeships, you often think, oh, it's the young student, whereas I've used it in my business to upskill existing staff. So, what can we use to actually leverage people to make sure they've got that right digital skills?
Yeah, that's a really good shout. I think, we're sort of seeing that apprenticeships provide a lot of potential and are being misunderstood and are being, as a result, being underutilised.
Yeah, and thinking sort of broadly about our attitudes that we're coming in as business leaders, I was really interested in UNESCO's focus on moving to a knowledge society and actually treating kind of access to information and knowledge as more of a fundamental right that we should provide for. And so, that would mean more zero-rated sites that are educational and therefore won't sort of use up data, continuation of investing in infrastructure and the right sort of tools and access levels. And I was interested in your work, actually, Holly, Jacob. I'd love to hear more, potentially, if we have time, on your partnerships with educational settings, because I was hearing a little bit from academics in the University of Birmingham how there is a lack of incentivisation to break down silos. And so I was hearing about certain academics who have relationships with certain businesses and they're not incentivised to share them because that's where their funding comes from. And so if they then share, someone else might poach the funding. And we find that a lot of our efforts to really close the digital skills gap seem to me to be quite piecemeal and quite siloed. And I was speaking to, again, public sector colleagues, and they were talking about the fact that we really design around our function rather than around kind of the end state or the desired state, the kind of the service. And so we need to bring together our data, digital, policy, legal teams to really work holistically to close the divides that we're starting to see as well. And absolutely would want to see more public-private partnerships. Completely agree. I'm really excited about the potential of apprenticeships and work experience and opportunities that enable you to really sort of embed and consolidate the digital skills that you're gaining. So I think sometimes people tend to focus on the training as the end state, but actually that's just a vehicle to get you to somewhere. So making sure that we create those opportunities is really key. And what really interests me is that if you think about this from a socioeconomic perspective as well, 49% of school leavers in a recent survey in the lowest socioeconomic group were stating that they had no training since leaving secondary school whatsoever. That's a huge sort of untapped source of potential and support needed as well.
It's actually quite a nice segue onto our last actual question, which is around the education system. So what more, I think we've established that there's potential for the education system to be doing more or doing things differently. So what do you think the education system could be doing to better equip the next generation with better digital capabilities?
Well, one thing I'm quite excited about is teacher encounters. So I know that with the Gatsby benchmarks, they're quite focused on this at the moment, and they're trying to roll it out from September, and that's encouraging businesses to take teachers in, whether it's for a day, a week, whatever you can fit in, to actually bring your world of work to life so they can then take that back to the classroom. So if we can make this work, I think that could be a really good way forward of actually having those teacher encounters with businesses, as well as the other things that are going on with work experience, apprenticeships, T-levels and university routes. So I'm quite excited about that. I think that could work quite well if we can make it happen.
That sounds super interesting. It's not something I knew about. Like, if people want to find out more about it,
If you go on the Careers and Enterprise Company website, there's loads of stuff about it, about the teacher encounters.
Wonderful. Sounds really interesting. Harriet?
Nice. Yeah, I, as a defector from the teaching profession, would want to see more support with the retention and recruitment crisis as well. I found that in teaching, it was very much a lifestyle choice, and the workload was enormous and quite unsustainable. And if we're asking teachers to really do more to close the digital literacy skills gaps, we need to make sure that we're actually investing in better tools for teachers, for sort of automating marking and planning opportunities, that we have more support for the basics of tech in teacher training, and actually getting teachers' own sort of skills gaps that they might be too embarrassed to admit, and there's no psychological safety to really address in more space of time. So in the training for teachers, we'd like to sort of take a look at that as well. We've talked about sort of representation with options for looking at what's possible in careers, and making sure that we actually have representative role models attending there to show people what's possible. People who look like them can succeed. And I think, of course, what I want to make sure is that we don't just focus on the kind of, I know we've got this great focus on coding and skills and so on as well, but we need to make sure we think holistically about the kind of almost the metacognition, or teaching people to learn how to learn, especially when it comes to digital upskilling. So you're building in resilience to be able to sort of adapt and flex. A lot of my colleagues say we focus quite a lot on tools rather than on actually the ability to cope with the changes that are brought by tools. And so we need to make sure that we're actually thinking more about the stepping back and about the kind of the power skills again that are needed here. And I think lastly, to end on this, I'd really like us to move away from those individualistic structures that encourage the me and mine mentality of sort of lacking the ability to really tap into networks and collaborative and supportive team structures as well. So even in the sort of the education system, I'd be really interested to see more focus on collaborative teamwork, and that sort of being more part of assessments, and within universities and even within businesses themselves, looking at kind of the way we do sort of bonus structures and so on, to make sure that we actually focus a lot more on that collaborative mentality, which is really needed to unlock the power of digital transformation as well.
Cool. Thank you, both. So in the spirit of keeping this moving along, we'll open it up for questions. Hopefully it's, some of the things you've heard have sparked some ideas and thoughts. I think just get us started, we've got an online question.
Thank you. We've got a question from Diego Martinez from the London School of Economics. What should the IT industry and other stakeholders do in order to facilitate that undeserved groups really benefit from using internet beyond providing digital skills training?
Would either of you like to take that first?
Think about it.
Beyond digital skills training, I think that we need to make sure that we are thinking about the kind of holistic, I don't want to sort of rehash too many previous points, but thinking about how we're actually, one point that was really interesting actually that came from the House of Law's recent report, just published a couple of weeks ago, was the idea of having sort of centralised community spaces where you can have sort of upskilling, actually physically present in person, or train up librarians, train up people that our young people will be encountering on a regular basis, so that there are kind of support networks around them that exist outside of family structures and school structures where curriculum time is really pressured and intense. To sort of give that extra layer of support as well. So that's one thought that springs to mind here. I think another thought would be, coming back to that point about the representative role models, and making sure that actually we demystify what we see in tech as well. So we change that perception of that kind of the guy with the hoodie with his headphones in, sort of often white, who's siloed and by himself in front of a computer, and we sort of take opportunities to really showcase actually the what's possible, and show, maybe it's sort of a question of really celebrating various sort of role models in the industry who are genuinely representative and bringing those into education settings as well. I think a lot of the success that we'll have will depend on kind of like the ready-made kind of here you go resources given to schools where teachers are just so busy and so pressured they can just take them, slot them into the existing curriculum and run with it. And so I think we need to sort of work a little bit better to centralise the resources that we're creating, to free up some time for those teachers so we can make sure we're getting the right information and messaging through to schools. And I'm sure there are many more points, but these are just the first things that have come to my mind at present.
Holly, did you have anything?
It's hard to sort of add to that really, because I think, I've spoken a lot about business engagement. One thing I wanted to add to that was when we're talking about business engagement, it's not just big business. I've lost count of the amount of meetings I've been at where we've talked about cornerstone employers and big business, whereas actually the voice of the small business, which makes up the majority of the economy, is really, really vital. So I would encourage them to engage more, and when we're having things like LSIP boards and local authority and economic partnerships, that we make sure that we've got a true representation of the economy around the table, to make sure that when we're agreeing things, schemes and things, that actually all businesses are going to be able to tap into it.
I might just sort of add one little bit, which is just on apprenticeships. While that is a sort of a form of education, it's about providing the routes into employment, so and better utilising them as an avenue to take people into roles that they might not have previously considered, and to Harry's point, demystifying what it actually means to work in digital. Do we have any other questions in the room, perhaps? Yeah.
Can I just ask you about education? Sorry, Neil Sharpley, also Federation of Small Businesses. I'm an enterprise advisor for our local secondary school. We have one part-time person looking after the career needs of 1,200 pupils. We have 50 to 100 different careers, all trying to thrust themselves forward when you have a careers fair. I attended an event recently when they asked, how do we get people interested in cyber resilience skills? And the problem is that you've got so many pressures with Ofsted and with curricular demands. What do you say to the Department for Education to change the priorities, if you like, within schools for careers generally, but also in terms of digital skills? And irrespective of that, do you think that the answer is in being proactive with industry and, say, forming digital partnerships with secondary schools between business and the schools in order to promote it?
So look, I'll just an initial thought on that, which is that I think it is incumbent on industry to be doing more, because industry are the experts on this. So even if you increase the capability within schools to do careers advice, the industry is moving at such a pace that how realistic is it that schools can, a couple of, even though you have more careers advisors, that they are going to be experts enough on each of those areas to appropriately sort of advise students. So I think, we've talked about sort of STEM programs and sort of going, industry being in schools, talking about what it means. I think there's a big opportunity there for industry to be, be doing a lot more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressures on schools at the moment. I was at a Careers Hub launch the other day where they were talking really excitedly about, we can do this, this and this, and the careers lead was sitting next to me saying, I haven't got the resources all the time to deliver any of that, and I had a local authority sitting on the other side of me going, no, can't fund any of that. So like the whole idea of that business engagement and the skills engagement was just completely dead in the water, because they were just saying they couldn't possibly achieve it. So I think we do need to work closer with the Department of Education to say, well, how are we going to do this? So very well saying let's do more, but how are we actually going to achieve that? And do we actually really need to look at what's being taught at the curriculum? Because I personally don't feel like it's delivering what we need as businesses, especially in the terms of digital skills.
Okay. So it's not just careers advice, it's the actual...
It's the whole thing to me,
himself. Okay.
And I'd probably go back to that sort of utopia in my mind where every school has students equipped with digital devices that aren't sort of segregated to this sort of single siloed space in a classroom that's very separate from themselves, and actually they're able to develop the digital skills throughout all parts of the curriculum on a regular basis, so that then the shift in focus can be away from the basic skills that students don't have, and therefore there's a little bit more space freed up in commuting and whatever else it might be to really sort of expose the students to other further opportunities. I think, like you say, 12,000 pupils, like a whole competing range of careers calling for attention, but actually I think we shouldn't sort of silo it as a sort of single sort of later option down the line. We should sort of embed the digital capability much more throughout the entire education sort of experience that students have from primary school further. One of the benefits being through actual personal digital devices, and then I think that will sort of give them more sort of interest and confidence to actually be able to explore these other careers. And actually I think we should be careful, because of course digital skills and digital capability is needed in almost every single career that we've got going forward. So I think that we can't sort of segregate that from our kind of and box it into, oh well, they'll only be able to encounter possibilities in careers fairs or when exploring future jobs. We need to kind of build it in as more of a natural day-to-day part of their working.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks. Stephen Patterson from the Microbit Educational Foundation. The Microbit is a small programmable device that circulates in schools. I'm going to ask us a question. It's not a question, but I'm going to make a slightly provocative point, really. Do you think we have the wrong people teaching digital in schools? And I'll tell you where I'm coming from on this, is that, and it's been apparent in this conversation, that there are two ways of looking at this. One is, I think as Holly was saying, are we training people to be able to make use of digital technology in the right way? And the other is, which I think is where the government has been coming from for a long time, which is, can't we train more computer engineers and computer scientists and then everything's going to be hunky-dory? And the problem with the latter, being slightly controversial, is that I'm not sure how many computer engineers and computer scientists we need. I mean, as far as I'm aware, we've never gone around trying to teach primary school kids law or accountancy. I think we have enough lawyers and enough accountants without bothering them under the age of 12 about that. Maybe the same is true of really hardcore computer design and engineering. And maybe what we need is to give everybody at school a kind of sense of computer literacy, so that some of them will go on to be engineers, but every one of them will be able to understand the basic principles. They might never, I'll jump. The first person who ever repaired a car was obviously a pretty hot engineering boffin, right? But now you don't need to have a PhD in engineering to get a job in car maintenance. Isn't that the position we need to move to with digital technology? So, stop calling it computational thinking, which is a total turn-off to everybody. I'm not sure that computational literacy is a turn-on, but it gets more accurate to what I think schools should be trying to do. Sorry, all of that was a bit muddled, and I can see people losing interest, but you get the idea.
I'm actually going to suggest it's not actually that controversial. I think, it's sort of the fundamentals of, it's like, the essential foundational sort of skills that people can then use to choose their own paths is, so I think it's pretty well established, and that, digital is more than just engineering, is what we're hearing so much of, that there's so many other sort of related jobs that fit within the digital world. So, Harriet, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I could not agree more, actually. And when I was, again, back in teaching, I was outraged when a science teacher stood up in the staff room and said, oh, every teacher is a teacher of English. And I thought, that's ridiculous. It's really denigrating my subject and the expertise of how to get here. But actually, their point was every teacher is a teacher of literacy. Every teacher should be able to have the fundamental skill sets to support and inspire students in that area. And I think absolutely the same is true when we come to digital literacy. Every teacher should be a teacher of digital literacy and the core basics of the skills. But beyond that, moving into the power skills as well. Okay, so let's focus on teaming and actually the kind of like giving our teachers a bit of an insight into what that looks like in real world context in professions as well, so they can focus on more than just kind of here are the basics, but also these are why these skills are important. This is how you might use it in a real world context later. This is why influencing, inspiring is key. This is why kind of building meaningful empathy with people is key through literature, whatever it might be. So yes, I'm really pleased that you made that statement.
I do agree with your statement. My ICT teacher was clearly reading it from a book when they were teaching us coding. They were like, right, go to hello world, and like it didn't understand what it was teaching us at all. So I do think that maybe these teacher encounters will help with that. We went into a college recently and we were talking about, Power BI is going to do all these amazing things, and they'd never heard of Power BI. And I'm like, how can you not have heard of that? So yeah, hopefully we can bring them forward with those more meaningful interactions.
Thanks, Holly. So we're going to have to wrap up at 5 o'clock on the dot. So one more question from here.
Another resource that is very useful are the cyber resilience centres that have now been set up in every region of the country. And these bring the expertise from universities, students who will help people in small businesses and so on to use cyber well. And they also link schools, universities together. And I would suggest that's a very useful source of...
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I feel on that probably feels like a great way to wrap up. So thank you for that. And thank you to Holly and Harriet.
Thank you.